wash una car. Na me with the cook no no.
You're listening to the sound
of Lagos.
Mainland FM 98.3.
All right, good morning and welcome to Trends in the Papers on 98.3 Mainland FM, the sound of Lagos. Today is the second day in the month of June and it's looking beautiful already. We're going to get into the end of the first half of the year. I know that there's a lot that's happening out there. There's a lot happening on the streets, but let's keep the faith, let's stay strong and let's keep hope alive. Very, very important. You're listening to Mainland 98.3 FM. My name is Omobola Sandra, and we'll be looking through the major stories on the front pages of our dailies this morning. And of course, I won't be doing this alone. Fuhad Saheed will be joining in via the phone line to give analysis to every one of the stories that we're going to be looking into this morning. Also, very, very important. Don't forget to tune in on Sunday by 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. as we have our first conversation in the month of June as regards everything and anything politics. Very important on Political Roundtable. Promises to be an interesting one. Of course, aside from all of that, as regards governance and whatnot, we also have a conversation by 4 p.m. with Okwemi Akinode in the Situation Room. Anything that has to do with just ensuring that you stay up to date, you stay current, you stay trendy as regards whatever is happening in and around the country. Of course, Mila 98.3 FM is your stop. Now, speaking of stops, let's start this morning with the Guardian newspaper. I have a headline here that's quite interesting. But before then, good morning, Fuhad.
Good morning, Sandra.
Yes.
And let's say thank God it's Friday.
Yes, sir. Thank God it's Friday. We'll always be thankful for irrespective of whatever it is, that life may be throwing at us at this time.
We are just tagging along. We don't even have a weekend anyway.
We just have to do we just have to do what we have to do. All right. But then, Fuhad, this very interesting headline on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, the major headline, as a matter of fact, 11 years after Occupy Nigeria, Tinubu toes painful path to economic rebirth. Before we go into the story, Fuhad, did you occupy Nigeria? 2012, I think.
Well,
it was 2012.
Well, incidentally, I did that in spirit. I wasn't really physically on ground to occupy. But of course, I supported the movement at that time. For the same reasons, I'm also saying that, look, the current removal of subsidy, the way it's done, needed to have been done methodically. Then the idea was not that subsidy should not be removed. The idea then was that, look, before the government removed subsidy, then there were things they needed to have done, which was to fix our refineries, which were to also ensure that they fix our energy problems in the electricity sector, ensure we have proper, and functional transportation system, and a whole lot of things. The same argument is still valid today, Sandra, that yes, if subsidy has to go, there are things the government should put in place to properly alleviate the sufferings of the people before they remove subsidy. So it's still the same reasons that people are questioning the decision of the government to remove subsidy by putting the cart before the horse.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, I have a few questions I'm going to be asking from this report as we dig deep into what exactly, we have here. So I would require that we, move quickly because there's a lot of, information that we need to digest. Now, we have here that the new president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, at least has demonstrated in the last few days that he has the courage to act as regards, making very important decisions. That means he is actually hitting the ground running. And, looking from this particular report, it says here there are bold attempts by President Bola Tinubu-led administration aimed at reforming the downstream segment where the country has performed poorly over the year, considering overbearing control on the economy. Coming amid fear of monopoly, unclear policy implementation, lack of holistic alternative, profiteering, poverty, insecurity, energy transition, weak consumer protection, as well as high cost of governance, most stakeholders have expressed divergent opinions on the president's plans, even as the odds are deafening. Now, it goes further to speak, on the subsidy era where, in the petroleum industry, subsidy payments and a weak downstream sector are a falling knife on an economy with many negative indices. That's heavy debt, high inflation, acute infrastructural shortage, and high unemployment. Now, do you believe that the deregulation may in one way or the other, or the removal of subsidy in one way or the other, and also the fact that we're going towards a deregulated downstream sector, what do you think that impact would have on the economy, looking at the many negative indices that already comes with the fact that we're paying subsidy and we have a weak downstream sector?
You see, Sandra, I think we have to be careful to go with a single narrative on this particular issue, because it's all looking as if the only reason why we have economic woes in Nigeria is because we are paying subsidy.
Oh,
that's what we are being sold. That's the narrative we are being sold now. That look, it's as if the reason why we have economic problems in Nigeria is because we are paying subsidy, and that if subsidy goes, it's El Dorado for Nigeria. We have to be careful to believe these things, especially from our politicians. Because that's what they are putting on the table for us now. That the only reason why Nigeria has economic challenge. Nobody's talking about corruption in the system. Nobody's talking about how we manage our resources. Nobody's talking about the fact that even before we even refine fuel, what of the issue of crude oil theft and how to manage it? Nobody's talking about insecurity that has made our farmers not be able to go to farm and do the right thing. Nobody's talking about how to diversify our economy. Nobody's talking about the cost of governance. Everybody now believes that, immediately subsidy is removed, it's El Dorado for Nigeria. I'm sorry, I'm not going to buy that kind of argument, because I know that the economic challenges of Nigeria are beyond the issue of subsidy. I agree that the way we have managed subsidy has to go. It is time for subsidy to go. But I say that, look, we should be careful to put the cart before the horse. You listed a lot of things now, Sandra, about the downstream sector, about the fraudulent subsidy regime. The fact that, as we Sandra, we don't even have an accurate data on the daily consumption of fuel in the country. There are a lot of things wrong that I think that, look, before we remove subsidy, we should first fix and resolve. I'm not saying subsidy should not go. Sandra, I've seen people make arguments that, what is the cost of PMS in Cotonou? What is the cost of PMS in Togo? And all of that. And I said, look, the reason why Nigerians are talking about subsidy, or subsidy is even an issue in Nigeria, is because we are an oil-producing nation. That look, as an oil-producing nation, what do we stand to benefit from God's given natural resource? That's why we are talking about subsidy. And let me tell you, Sandra, there are people that will also come up with the argument. I was listening to the GMD of NNPCL in an interview, and he was talking about the fact that, look, people should not go with the erroneous argument that, look, once we fix our refinery, the price of PMS will go down substantially. That, look, refining locally will only provide jobs, it will make products available, but it will not necessarily bring down the cost of PMS. He said the margin may not be more than maybe 50 or 60 naira. And I say that, look, these people should be careful with what they tell us, because we are not dummies. Sandra, if you go to Saudi Arabia, which is also an oil-producing nation, go to Angola and check how they ensure their people get adequate benefits from being an oil-producing nation. I can tell you today that in Saudi Arabia, apart from the fact that the cost of PMS is heavily subsidized, public transportation is also heavily subsidized in Saudi Arabia because of the proceeds of oil that has made that country self-solvent and self-sufficient. Their health sector is also heavily subsidized. Education, heavily subsidized to the benefit of the people, because they've been able to harness the resources that God has given to them for the benefit of their people. So we ask ourselves, Sandra, let us even put it practically on the table. What do Nigerians benefit from the government? Let's just even start a practical analysis. Where are the hospitals? Go to our public hospitals and see the condition of things. Go to our public universities and see the condition of things. Where is power? Where is electricity? What is the cost of public transportation as we speak? What do you have? Do we have an organized public transportation system in the country, Sandra, as we speak? So what we are saying is that, look, the only thing that we practically benefit from the government is this subsidy. But unfortunately, the same government has not done the right thing to ensure that there's transparency and accountability of the subsidy regime. So we ran it into a fraudulent process, and that's why it must go. But if it must go, Sandra, the people that are staying, the people in government who have spent fat on the nation, are telling Nigerians to sacrifice. They are telling Nigerians to bear the brunt and the pain that will come from subsidy removal. Have they told us what the people in government are ready to sacrifice? What will happen to the animals?
Hello, Fuhad. Sorry, the quality of the call has gotten a little bit shaky. You may have to move a bit because you're breaking up.
Is it better now?
Oh, yes, it is. Thank you. All right. But, as I mentioned earlier, that it's a very long report, and I have, series of questions that, I was going to bring out from the report. But then, I gotten all of what you have mentioned, but I'm going to come from, there's a statement here in this report that says the biggest challenge this is coming from the NMDPRA, yes, NMDPRA, that's Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, yes. That is an expert from that field who is asking this question that, who said the biggest challenge for him is, why do we need to set prices when it is a deregulated market? The market should be the one to determine the price. So, because with the increase in the pump price and all of that, and considering the fact that our minimum wage is minimum, the truth of the matter is petrol touches everything in Nigeria. So why can't the market determine the price when it is said that it's a deregulated market?
You see, Sandra, that's also one of the problems with the way we run the oil sector. In one breath, you tell us that, look, you are deregulating the downstream sector, which means you are opening it up to the market to determine pricing. That's what deregulation means. That, look, you are not regulating it again. Regulate and deregulate. Regulate is that, look, you are taking your hands off, pricing, because again, deregulation should also mean, look, marketers should have the opportunity to go and source for their petrol anywhere in the world and sell at whatever price they want to sell. But in one breath, you cannot talk about deregulation when you are fixing prices. You cannot talk about deregulation when you are also determining who can bring in fuel into the country. It means you have to completely open up the sector. So if, for example, I have 10 filling stations and I can find petrol in Niger to sell at whatever price, let me sell it. But how would you say you want to hands off or you want to deregulate? You are fixing prices, and to a great extent, you are still determining who and where petrol should come into the country. So those are some of the issues that when I talked about not putting the cart before the horse, that's exactly what I'm saying. That why can't the government take its time to resolve all of these issues, solve all of these problems, get a clear idea where the problems are and fix them, before you decide to remove subsidy, because we are remove subsidy now. That's what we have been told. But here you have, we speak, Sandra, you are fixing prices and say you are deregulated, which is in itself an aberration. It doesn't even make any sense. So a lot of issues that we have not been able to resolve, and that's why we are saying that, look, we are not saying subsidy should not go, but why the hurry? Why the hurry? Can't we be methodical about it?
All right. Now, I'm also going to look at it from this angle now where, there's some suggestions that we have here before we then go on to powering economic growth and shrinking monetary and fiscal options. Because the truth is, there's a whole lot that comes with, the removal of the subsidy regime, whether we like it or not. Just as I mentioned earlier, petrol touches everything in Nigeria, especially small and medium scale businesses. But then, Fuhad, it says here that there must, however, be palliatives which should be segmented into immediate, short-term, and medium-term deliverables. He said, for immediate and short-term options, this should include wage review in public service, introduction of introduction of subsidized public transportation schemes across the country, reduction in import duties on intermediate products for food-related production to moderate food inflation. Now, it said for medium to long-term deliverables, there should be accelerated efforts to upscale domestic refining capacity driven by private investments, accelerated investments in rail transportation by the government to ease logistics of fuel distribution across the country, as well as domestic freight costs. What do you think of these suggestions, that have been put forward as palliatives, to, one way or the other support the people during this removal time?
Sandra, I'll ask you a very simple question. The things you just listed now, should they have come before remove subsidy or remove subsidy and then they come? Which one do you think makes sense?
They were just like asking that, do you remove the band-aid while the wound is still healing? So you wait for the wound to heal up.
Wait, I've just asked you a question. Do you think the things you suggested now, that we should have made sure those things are in place before we remove subsidy, or we remove subsidy and then start to put those things in place? And I'll tell you something, Sandra.
Yes.
We can go with any of the two suggestions. Get those things in place and then remove subsidy, or remove subsidy and get those things in place. But you know the problem of Nigerians? You know why Nigerians are worried about those things? Can we trust the government to do those things now? I want to beg you again. Can you just do the list again and ask yourself, Sandra, and I'm sure that's the same question I ask Nigerians. Can you trust the government to do those things that have just been listed as suggestions on the best way to, of course, alleviate the sufferings of Nigerians at this time? You can read those things again and let us ask ourselves that a government that from 1999 till date has not been able to do any of those things, can we trust them to now do it? And I said something, because what it would now mean is that we have to take our time, because this thing cannot happen overnight. It will take years for those things to happen. So Nigerians would have to bear the pain and brunt while we hope that those things would happen. So the question I ask again from people in government, where then is their own sacrifice? What are they going to be doing about their humongous allowances, salaries, extra codes? Because I know that those things will not be affected. They will still live their normal life. While we hope and pray to God that those things that have been listed as the best way to alleviate the sufferings of Nigerians happen. And it may never happen if we go by the records of people of how our government has been run from 1999 to date. And that is the fear, that can we trust the government to do the needful? Should Nigerians even decide to bear the pain and suffering, can we trust them? Can we trust the government?
So the question now is, if these are available, you think that that the removal of subsidy may be a necessary discomfort for the people? If these suggestions, if these deliverables are available, that the removal of subsidy may be a necessary discomfort?
No. In fact, if these things are available, then subsidy should go. Okay. Like I said, there's no problem subsidy going.
All right. So moving on now, still on economic or the painful path to economic rebirth. You mentioned something earlier that we're making it seem like the subsidy payment was a serious issue or the biggest burden on our economy as a nation. Even as for decades, it says here in the report that Nigeria's petroleum industry has contributed abysmally to the gross domestic product, as the contribution in 2022 stood at 5.67%. Imagine that. So now, ending all of this, we have here the power sector. Access to reliable and affordable power is critical to the functioning of any economy, from powering homes and businesses to supporting transportation and healthcare. This makes electricity an essential resource. Now we're looking on the possibility of accessible power. Because the truth of the matter is, even if you take up subsidy, even with the discomfort and all of that, say for example, you introduce subsidized public transportation schemes across the country, these are still going to run, we have real systems that, run on power, as well. Now, as regards possibilities of accessible power, what do you think as regards, massive investments, especially in distribution networks and also availability of mini grids? Hello, Fuhad. Oh, no. Wow, this was quite an interesting conversation so far. You're listening to Trends in the Papers on 98.3 Mainland FM, and we are having a conversation as regards the major headline on the front page of The Guardian. We're going to wrap it up very soon, but then if we're going to be talking about economic rebirth, fine, we have discussed about subsidy removal, and there are suggestions here in the papers as regards immediate to short-term to medium-term deliverables on how, palliatives, on palliatives that can help to mitigate the effect of the removal of subsidy. But then, if we're going to be talking about powering economic growth, we can't shy away from the importance of electricity, power. And that is why I'm asking Fuhad now that on the possibilities of accessible power, do you think massive investment, especially in distribution networks, and also the availability of mini grids in rural areas where the larger grids do not extend to, do you think that it will help to drive power accessibility?
Definitely it will help, Sandra. But can we trust the government to do that? That's the big question. We don't.
Everything that we ask now is, can we trust the government?
Look, Sandra, if you have been served breakfast for 24 years, you don't understand what I'm saying.
You have trust issues. You have trust issues.
You have trust issues now. It's not normal for Nigerians to have the trust issues. I'll keep asking the question. It was the same narrative that was sold to us about removing subsidy on kerosene. And look, whatever we say would help in some ways. Subsidy has been removed from kerosene, nothing has happened. The same narrative was sold to us about diesel. The price of diesel jumped from around 240, 250 to 800 and almost 1,000. The money we saved on diesel, what have we been able to do with it? The solution to our power problem is clear. It's not a big deal, Sandra. But the question is that, look, can we trust the government to deliver on their promises? If we consider what has happened from 1999 till today. Because again, it's not about political parties now. It's about the political culture of our politicians not delivering on promises. If you understand what I'm saying. So where I'm going to, again, you talk about palliative, Sandra. Let us be careful to also buy this narrative of palliative. Say it again. I hope, because if you ask yourself now, Sandra, has the government told us anything about what they want to do to alleviate the sufferings of the people? Is anything on the table? Yes. Nothing, practically. The last one we heard was that they secured $800 million loan from the World Bank. And the idea was that we were going to be giving 5,000 to the most vulnerable Nigerians. Sandra, I can tell you for free, with the way we moved the price of PMS from 185 to 500 and above now, every Nigerian is vulnerable. When I say every Nigerian, just consider every Nigerian that does not have access to government money vulnerable as we speak. We are all vulnerable now as we speak. People are going to lose their jobs. People are probably going to resign when they check their salaries and they look and not take them to work. So we are all vulnerable. So what will 5,000 naira do? And how many people do they want to give 5,000 naira to? The issue of affordable and accessible power. How will the government address that? Considering the fact that we are still hovering around 3,000. We have an epileptic national grid that collapsed 99 times in 8 years.
All right.
How would they quickly invest in that sector to ensure and guarantee affordable and accessible power? What of public transportation? You know how chaotic is it? It is, even in a city like Lagos, where Ajibola runs, amok on public transport drivers. So there's a lot that we need to do, and the question is still about trust. Can we trust the government to do the needful? To Nigerians even decide to bear the pain and burden?
Okay. Thank you very much. Just as we said, there's a whole lot, but then, yes, we know that there's the need to take some hard decisions to grow the economy. But just as Fuhad has said, can we trust the government to put certain things in place to mitigate the effects of all of this as we are looking forward to some sort of economic rebirth? So many things that needs to be looked into. More details on pages 4 and 5 of the Guardian newspaper. 11 years after Occupy Nigeria, Tinubu tours painful path to economic rebirth. Moving on now, we also have petrol subsidy removal. NLC debunks strike action, unveils position today after consultations. And that is on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. So just very quickly, I'll read through and then we move on to the next story. We don't have so much time. We have riders to that particular story. Negotiation with government resumes on Sunday. NMDPRA, we won't fix petrol prices again. NNPC, no funds for subsidy in 2023 budget, no going back on removal. Reps want 413 billion naira subsidy claim payment audited. Isiaka urges Tinubu to roll out plans for palliatives. Removal of subsidy must not excavate poverty. Okay, yes. AI cautions. All right, thank you very much. That is the report that we have. That's basically all of the report that we have from that particular story. More details, as mentioned earlier, on page 6, where we have the NLC will today articulate their position on the policy and takeoff of the petroleum liberalization policy of the federal government. That's on page 6. Now, moving on, we also have here, Tinubu meets intelligence security chiefs, gives mandate to tackle insecurity. Fuhad, this is also a major, part that needs to be looked into if we're going to be talking about economic rebirth. Don't you think? Insecurity, because here we have the president has met with the nation's security.
Service chiefs, yeah.
At the presidential villa Abuja, where he gave marching orders to heads of security agencies in the country to redouble efforts in dealing with the menace of terrorism, insurgency, banditry, oil theft, sea robbery, and piracy, among others, that have conspired to weigh down the nation.
Well, we're going to be waiting for his blueprint on national security, because as it is, I think the best that we have from his 88-page manifesto, renewed hope manifesto, and his inaugural speech was basically that, look, they need more equipment, they need more training, and all of that. And I must say that, the level of insecurity we have in Nigeria, I think, goes beyond just training and providing weapons. We need to restructure what we have now. And I'm more particular, not even about the armed forces, not about the army or the navy and what have you. My concern is on the police, the structure of the police as we have it in the country. What will the president be doing about the structure of the police? Would he be activating a legal framework to ensure that we have a state police system? It's one thing I'll be waiting for. Like I said, we don't have a blueprint yet. He doesn't have a minister of interior yet. We don't have a minister of defense yet. So it will be difficult for me to start to judge what he wants to achieve. But we are waiting. We are hoping that maybe in the first 100 days, we'll have complete clarity on what he wants to achieve with security in the country.
Well, according to the report we have here, the president says he has already mandated the security agencies to come up with a blueprint. As far as he knows, he doesn't have the luxury of time, and whatever changes will be made have to be done as soon as possible.
He would have to give them his blueprint. They can't give him a blueprint. He would have to give them a blueprint. He gives them his achievables, what he intends to achieve. And like I said, more than any other thing, as far as security is concerned in Nigeria, we have to look at the structure of the police. And most importantly, I'll be waiting to see whether it's going to activate a legal framework to ensure that we devolve policing into the country, to create what we have always demanded for, and that is state policing. So we will have to wait. But that for them to give him a blueprint, no, he will be the one to give them a blueprint, what he wants to achieve.
All right. What about this rider that I have here that says the new administration won't condone working at cross purposes, colliding with each other. These security agencies, is saying, oh no, it's supposed to be something I'm supposed to do. That has also been an issue, don't you think?
No, it's easy for him to rein them in. And basically, the easiest way to do that is for them to know that you're not going to tolerate that kind of nonsense. It's happened severally in the last 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari.
All right.
Because the last report, again, when you have the DSS, EFCC office and all those kinds of things, I think we need to tidy the presidency, the executive, and so that they know that, look, you can't do that. That's completely embarrassing. So I think the new president can easily resolve all of that.
All right, then let's move on to the next headline on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Since we are going to be talking a lot of, economy and business-related conversations from the Guardian today. So what I have here is Nigeria's business conditions, confidence economy level hit 5-month high. So Nigeria's PMI, that's Purchasing Managers Index, which is a metric for measuring the direction of the economy, has climbed up from 53.38 to print 54 points in May, which is the highest since the beginning of the year. And looking at the latest survey, it says that recovery from the cash crisis continues even in May. And while employment was up marginally amid a subdued look, new orders, according to findings, reached a 13-month high last month. So whereas the rate of job creation was marginal, looking at the fact that private sector operators are now cautious in recruitment, in hiring, especially in this time that we're in.
Well, Sandra, the reality is this. You said our conversation will be more about the state of the economy and how to get out of the doldrums. The reality is that we know the solution to our economic problems. But I've always said it will require a lot of hard work. It will require a lot of deep thinking and intentional actions. It's not going to happen by, we looking for an easy way out of it. I always say the idea of trying to tamper with monetary and fiscal policies will not even help anything. There are rumors now that the Naira has been devalued by the CBN. Although there are really no official statements there, but, we are having it reported on some media platforms that, look, the Naira has been devalued. And I say that, look, you can devalue the Naira, but the reality is that, look, Sandra, until we work actively and intentionally about fixing our balance of trade, nothing is going to change. And what do I mean by working on our balance of trade? We must go back to producing. We have to begin to produce to the point where we are self-sufficient and can earn enough forex from export. Immediately our balance of trade continues to show that with over 70% margin, we are importing more than exporting. There's nothing that would change, no matter any data that anybody brings to the table. And how do we go to the point where we now begin to produce? To the point where we can be self-sufficient and export and reduce substantially our level of importation. Sandra, we need to fix basic things that we are always been talking about. The first one would have to be power. We cannot talk about industrialization, production, when we are hovering around 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. Sandra, the largest economy in Africa is hovering around 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. So that means that we have to do the hard work to fix the issue of power. We need to fix the issue of insecurity, Sandra, because if we are going to be talking about diversifying the economy into agriculture, extractive industries, and other resources that God has given to us, people have to be secured. We have to invest in infrastructure, road, rail. Those things are also very, very important for any producing nation. And then begin to see how we can help SMEs, Sandra.
Right.
Single-digit loans for SMEs. A lot of support must go to SMEs because that's the way to organically develop the economy. So you can see that it requires a lot of hard work and intentional thinking.
All right, Fuhad, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate. You're listening to Trends in the Papers on Mainland 98.3 FM, and we're just through with the Guardian newspaper. We're moving on now to the Punch newspaper. and a lot of economic, conversations or economical conversations that we have been having
about the life of the people.
It's very, very important, Fuhad, and that's why I'm rushing you a bit. Apologies. But then the major headline of the Punch newspaper says Dangote, Port Harcourt refineries, others won't change fuel price, says NNPCL. And what I have here is that the NNPCL's Group Chief Executive Officer, Mele Kyari, has said that there's a notion that if product is processed locally, price would reduce. He said, and I'm quoting, "Let me make it clear that it is not going to change anything. If you produce locally, the refineries will also impute the cost of production and other things, and it will be sold at the current price," saying there will also be no subsidy when local production starts because there's no cashback subsidy. This country no longer has the resources to continue with subsidy. So Fuhad, here we are now. Mele Kyari is telling us that whether or not we are refining locally, whether or not we are refining with the nation's own refineries, the price of petrol would still remain the same. It doesn't change. So what exactly was the point of subsidy in the first place?
God bless you for that question, Sandra. I listened to that interview. I know when you hear some of these people say these things, you just shake your head. Let me ask you a question. The living standard of Nigerians, can we compare to that of another oil-producing nation like Saudi Arabia? What is the difference, Sandra? What has made Saudi Arabia get to the point where currently poverty in a country like Saudi Arabia is almost as less than 2%? To the extent that in Nigeria, we are talking about 133 million Nigerians, faced with multidimensional poverty. I'll tell you something. Yes, I agree that even if we have all the refineries in the world, we'll still have to price PMS against international pricing because of cost of production and all of that. The reality is that, look, it's not as if we're not going to save any money, Sandra. We're going to save some money because, again, you have to look at the cost of importation, forex, landing cost, and all of that. So we are going to save some money. It may not be too much, but that we will not save any money. No, we are going to save some money. And he said it in that interview that what we are going to save is just a very marginal, maybe 60 or maybe 50 to 60 naira. But there are things he failed to mention. Sandra, we are going to have some form of what? Stability. But in terms of what? Availability of the resources. We are going to have that stability. We are going to be able to what? Create jobs. Having refineries. Remember that, look, there are also byproducts that come from us refining locally in Nigeria, which will also give us some what? Money. We will also save some hard-earned forex that we are using to import fuel into the country because we are no longer importing. We have it here in Nigeria. If you understand what I'm saying. So it stabilizes our forex earnings. The little forex we have will be domiciled here in Nigeria instead of us using it to import fuel into the country. So you can see that, look, the benefits of us having refineries in Nigeria is even bigger than the price of PMA. It will have an overall effect positively on the economy in terms of employment, in terms of our forex, because again, we don't need to begin to import fuel. And then we save ourselves from the corruption of accountability when it comes to daily consumption of fuel in the country. And then we can then even determine, Sandra, since you are the ones refining it locally, that if we decide to regulate price, we can even regulate price to the benefit of Nigerians because we refine it locally here and it is easier for us to regulate at that level. So, they have to save us. Look, Sandra, look at the profit Aramco is turning out every day. Today, Aramco, a Saudi-run oil firm just like NNPC, is regarded as the most viable enterprise in the world. Why is our own different? Why is Mele Kyari not telling us about these things? So he wants to water down the argument that, we don't really need a refinery in Nigeria because it will not change anything. I say you should tell that to the Marines. It will change a lot of things. It will provide employment. It will save us from forex. It will create a new positive growth for Nigeria. So you should just save us that narrative.
Right,
and I think that more than ever before, Sandra, just 1 minute. NNPC has to be probed. A serious forensic audit of the activities of NNPC in the last 20 years is an important agenda that we must set for this new government. We have to know people that have been stealing our money. and account for it.
I completely agree. Thank you very much for it. Now, I have a few other questions, and I would really appreciate if we can move even faster than we are now. I have here that economic activities in certain states are clearly higher than others. And if the market determines the price, and you have where in Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, Kano, where you have high economic activities in these various different states now. So don't you think, or do you think that, situations like that would one way or the other resolve some certain issues in different corners of the country?
You see, again, that's why we keep arguing that, look, these things is about accountability. It's about, accountability at the level of governance. We agree that, look, you cannot compare the economic activities in Lagos, for example, with a state like Kebbi or Zamfara. You understand? And that is why, if you deregulate, yes, we agree that we can deregulate the sector. Again, if we can guarantee self-sufficiency, refine locally, and save ourselves from importation and all of this parade that we have in the oil sector now, it will be easy for. Look, do you know that you can even have a state invest in a modular refinery to take care of the needs of its own people? If you understand what I'm saying. If you open up the sector, deregulate it to that point, you can have situations where, each region can even take care of its own petroleum needs. We don't need to tie ourselves together. The way we are talking about regulating and unbundling the power sector, we can do that for the oil sector too.
All right.
At both the midstream and downstream sector, I agree. But it has to be intentional, and we have to be methodical about it.
Okay, so now, but what do you think about the House of Reps calling on the federal government to remove subsidy on all petroleum products?
Well,
Not just
what do you say the House of Reps? It's still the same narrative now. Like I said, everybody in government is on a consensus that subsidy has to go. And I'm saying that we're not saying subsidy should not go. But they have to consider again, the living conditions of ordinary Nigerians. And when you talk about palliative, Sandra, we have an experience. That's why I say there's a trust issue. Remember that during the COVID era, we budgeted billions of naira for palliative. It was handed over to our politicians. What happened at the end of the day? Most of them locked all those palliatives in warehouses until people that started to bust it and open it up themselves. So there are trust issues. Yes, we agree that subsidy has to go. But what is the government putting on the table for the people? And it has to be something realistic and meaningful.
All right.
I don't want to be hearing that they'll be sharing for 5,000. That should not even be on the table at all.
I think we've gone past that now.
We have not gone past the who told you? Okay. Have they announced any form of palliative now?
No, they haven't. But I don't think that 5,000 is going to stand at this time. But
so if they announce it, what should happen? That they will do 5,000 again.
So for how long? Is it every month? Is it every day?
That's why, you see, it is better to begin to tell them not to come with that bubu yaya. It is better to begin to tell them.
Thank you very much, Fuhad. Let me ask the final question for the morning. We have here that with subsidy removal, the federal government should forthwith suspend all direct sales, direct purchase, that's oil swap contracts.
That's another fraud, though, Sandra. You know what that means?
The NNP.
You know what that direct purchase, direct sales means?
Yes, to ensure that the country is not subchaining in both production, lifting and sales of crude.
That oil swap thing, Sandra. Sorry, if we prove that oil swap thing, I know many people will go to jail. You know what that oil swap means? We give our crude to them to foreign refineries. They refine and then give us petroleum products back. We have been doing that too. We just carry our crude, give it to them. They refine, and then they measure what our crude oil amounts to, and they give us PMA that is, commensurate with the value of the crude that we are giving to them. So we always ask the question, what are the other byproducts? Sandra, we need to audit the NNPC.
All right. Thank you very much, Fuhad. It's been quite an interesting morning, having all of these conversations. That's the major headline on the front page of the Punch, saying Dangote, Port Harcourt refineries and others won't change fuel price, rather. That's coming from Mele Kyari, the GCEO of NNPCL, saying that local refining will still not change pricing. He said, due to cost of production and all of that. And, So help us all. But we also have here NNPCL says 1.8 billion liters petrol available, and that the queues that we have won't exceed Saturday. Reps demand relief and palliatives for Nigerians and want oil swap deal suspended. More details on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. We also have here Naira trades 461 to $1 at investors' window. CBN denies devaluation. I wish we had Daily Trust, paper here with us this morning. There's been this back and forth, between Daily Trust newspaper and CBN as regards devaluation of the Naira. But more details of this on page 35 of the Punch newspaper. I also have here that operators kick as maritime workers short port on Monday. What is happening, in that particular sector? What we have is on page 28, and very, very quickly, I'll just give, an inside info as regards that particular one. What we have is that the Maritime Workers Union of Nigeria has threatened to embark on an industrial action on Monday over the poor welfare of its members in the shipping sector. The development has forced some operators in the maritime sector to kick, saying the proposed shutdown would affect business operations. The detail is on page 28 of the Punch newspaper.
You are talking about welfare of their workers.
I can barely hear you for the line.
Oh, you can't.
Short.
Yeah.
This line is
All right.
shaky.
I'll try.
I can hear you now. Okay, it's better now. Thank you.
So what I'm saying is that they are talking about the welfare of their workers before. I don't know what they'll be saying now that fuel is now almost 500 naira per liter. I think all of these strike actions are just to pass a message to the new government that there's a lot that they need to do when it comes to the welfare of workers. But that is the organized sector. I'm talking about the civil service. What of the private sector? How would business owners fund their workers now? Are they going to increase salaries? What of cost of production, cost of transportation? Honestly, there's a lot that needs to be done. But we'll wait to see what the government will come up with.
All right, well, that is on page 28. And finally, very quickly, I just need to take this one. It's above the masthead of the Punch, where we have USSD. Telcos issues banks disconnection notice. This is very important. The telco firms have issued deposit money banks disconnection notice amid a disagreement over USSD debt running to over 120 billion naira. Fuhad. So unfortunately, what it means is that as a result of this, the telcos have now stated their firm intention to disconnect bank customers from accessing bank services through USSD shortcodes. That's going to be a serious burden on a lot of people who can't use the app.
USSD charges, are they not deducted as source?
Yes, they are, but then the banks have to pay. It's from your bank account. Do you understand? It's deducted from your bank account.
It means that they are not remitting
to the telcos. Yes,
that's the problem. Why are they not remitting? Because
that's the issue.
They charge us. The consumers. The end users are not the ones owing now. Because
no, it's not us. It's the bank. The bank should pay.
So why are they not paying?
That's the big question, Fuhad. That is the big question. And now what we have is that the chairman of Association of Licensed Telecommunications Operators, Benga Adebayo, said that they have served the banks notices of disconnection. So very soon your star something hash may not be working anymore. So that's another serious problem that we might be facing, because a lot of the semi-literates
transactions,
are carried out using the USSD. But so help us God, so many things to deal with in this country. More details on page 27 of the Punch newspaper. Very quickly, I have just 2 minutes left. I have run through Vanguard. You're still listening to Mainland 98.3 FM, and this is Trends in the Papers. All right, so on the front page of Vanguard, we have the major headline: subsidy. New players will make petrol price come down, says Mele Kyari. Mele Kyari is so eloquent. You ask him one question.
He was never talking. This was a man that never honors the invitation of the house.
He always
He
has.
never addresses Nigeria. Now he's now talking.
If you
And
watch
what I'm saying is
okay.
he's complete boo-boo yaya for me.
If you watch that interview, for every question he had perfect answer to it. It's so interesting. Well,
The prices will look, Sandra, sorry, this was the same man that said, look, local refining will not change prices.
Yes.
But he's saying more players reduce the price. You can see the contradiction.
Well, more details on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper. Also, an update on the Presidential Tribunal. We have here that Peter Obi and the Labour Party have tendered results of 6 states and 115 local government areas in evidence. So things are still ongoing at the court, as you know, the conversation on who won at the February 25 election is still, up for conversation. That story is on page 9 of Vanguard newspaper. There's still a whole lot more stories, but that is those are the major stories that we have across the papers. We also have here cost of governance. We don't need Senate and House of Reps, says Shekarau. That's on page 8. That's also an interesting story.
I agree completely. We don't need more than one house.
Exactly. That's another interesting story that I see here.
Maybe that should be their own sacrifice to let's collapse the house into one and reduce the numbers. One representative per state.
Wow.
Okay. What are they talking about?
I wanted to go to House of Reps. You have killed my ambition.
No. Let's just collapse everything into one house.
My lifelong ambition.
And then just one representative per state is okay. What are we discussing here?
No, please. I have a lifelong ambition to be in the House of Reps.
I'm saying this as part of the sacrifice. If Nigerians can be buying a 500 per litre, they should also sacrifice and say, look, cost of governance is high. Let's collapse the house into one representative per state. It's okay.
Well, we have always had that conversation, as regards why we have a what's that word again? We just adopted the American system, and it's a waste of time here. It's not achieving anything for us, really. All right, and that's all we have this morning as regards trending stories. Those are the major trending stories across all of the papers this morning. But then stay with us. We'll take a short break and we'll be back by 8:40 as we pick 2 or more trending stories and then open up the phone line for you to join in on the conversation. I see messages are already being dropped as regards some of the stories, but don't worry, by 4 p.m. Okwemi will open up the phone line. It's open mic in the Situation Room. But today I would share the focus when we come back from our break. This is Mainland 98.3 FM. My name is Omobola Sandra. We have Fuhad, Saheed via the phone line, and we'll be right back.